Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Wes Hodkiewicz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field to talk about, Wes, a very uplifting victory by the Packers in Week 2. In the home opener, 16-10 was the final score over the Indianapolis Colts. And I'll just start by saying this. When you're taking the field with a backup quarterback and you're talking about a victory, and one of the first things that comes to mind is the game was actually kind of closer than it should have been. The team that won the game really did something right.
They sure did. And this was one of the, I think, finest coaching jobs that Matt LaFleur and his staff have done.
I agree.
This was one of the most well-executed game plans that I think I've witnessed during my time on the beat. And while there were some mistakes, it was not completely a clean football game. This Green Bay Packers team played well enough that those didn't even factor into the overall outcome of the game. They took the ball away. They dominated time of possession. They ran the ball at a historic rate, more than they have in the last 46 years in a game. Oh, and then, by the way, Malik Willis, who has been a Green Bay Packer now for all of 3 weeks, comes in, manages the game plan, and then in the second half, when the Indianapolis Colts make some adjustments, he makes some big-time throws on his own to be able to continue to push this pace for the Packers. This was one of the most complete overall victories that I think I've witnessed during my time on the beat, and the Green Bay Packers did it without Jordan Love on the field.
Yeah, the level of satisfaction, I mentioned this in Insider Inbox, the level of satisfaction, the thrill that a coaching staff and the players, for that matter, must feel when a game plan is executed so well right out of the gate and is so successful for such a large part of the game that you never have to deviate from it. You never really have to turn the page to plan B or anything. I mean, the Packers came into this game wanting to run the ball. They ended up running it 53 times for 261 yards. As you said, historic in the sense of the 53 carries, the most since 1978, I believe, in a game, and the 261 yards, the most in about 20 years or so. But they never had to really go to an alternative game plan because it was working so well, and it created that massive time of possession advantage, more than 20 minutes, almost 20 and a half minutes advantage in time of possession. And quite frankly, I mentioned this in the column as well. The only thing that kept the Indianapolis Colts in the game was when Josh Jacobs fumbled at the goal line as the Packers are headed in to go up 17-0 on their third offensive possession. That doesn't happen. It stays 10-0, and the Packers never really put the game away.
Yeah.
And that was really the one most regrettable mistake. But hats off to Josh Jacobs, man. The fumble is unfortunate. He knows it can't happen. But 85 degrees out there at Lambeau Field, he toted that rock 32 times for 151 yards. You talk about, call it bell cow, call it workhorse, whatever phrase you want to use as far as what Josh Jacobs meant to this offense on Sunday. The fumble is really too bad because otherwise we'd be talking about an all-time great performance by a Green Bay Packers running back.
Yeah, and I would actually be thinking too, man, if they do end up punching that ball in there and go up 17-0, where that game could have potentially gone at that point, because that might have actually been the backbreaker for the Colts. I think that actually gave them back a little bit of momentum, and obviously they put up some points after that. All that being said, Mike, the fact that Josh Jacobs, and he's proven it several times, this wasn't even his career high. He had a 33-carry game during his time with the Raiders in 2022. But the fact that he put himself physically in a position to be able to do that after there were a couple injury things during camp, there was another injury thing at the start of the season, but was able to manage himself and stay out there and be as explosive as he was. And that game plan, again, it reminded me of my days covering high school football in that a lot of times there wasn't a lot of throwing going on in the northeastern Wisconsin WIAA football.
Yep.
So what you would do is you have to get creative with your schemes. You have to give them different looks. The Green Bay Packers built multiple looks off of all of their runs, whether it was getting Jaden Reed involved now in that pony package. He's back there alongside Josh Jacobs. Reed even said that was probably the most running back he's played since high school in that game. You had Bo Melton using his speed on a reverse. You had so many different things that were built off of what Josh Jacobs did. But at the end of the day, if you don't block the way the Packers blocked, and Jacobs doesn't have the vision that he has where he could take a 2-yard run and turn it into a 34-yard bust. Yeah. I mean, it was incredible to watch, seeing his jump style and some of the things that he does well. It was a premium performance out of him, and when the Green Bay Packers went out there and they invested that money into him, this is exactly what they were thinking about, a game where it needed to be on his shoulders.
Yeah, Jacobs' vision and footwork are impressive to watch, especially watching from up in the press box where we get a wider view, we get a broader view of the field than the folks watching on TV. He always sees where the space is, and then it's a matter of some really, really nifty, quick footwork to be able to get his body in position to hit that space, and then he's able to hit it with some force because of the acceleration. It was really fun to watch, and hopefully 32 carries on an 85-degree day in week 2 didn't wear him out too much, because the Packers are certainly going to would love to see more performances like that. But you hinted at it as well, talking about some of the other guys. The Packers, what turned out to be the Packers' only touchdown drive of this game, 6 different people, including quarterback Malik Willis, had rushing attempts on one touchdown drive. 6 different guys. There was a mentality that the Packers were going to come in and run it, and the old Mike Tyson saying, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? Well, quite frankly, the Indianapolis Colts never threw a punch, because the Packers defense then kept the Colts kept them off the scoreboard for the first 40 minutes of the game, kept them out of the end zone for the first 58 minutes of the game. Unfortunately, it did come down to a Hail Mary. The Colts got a shot at a Hail Mary after scoring a touchdown, getting the ball back one last time, and then actually making their way out close to midfield where they had a shot of the Hail Mary, and then Evan Williams gets the interception for the third takeaway to seal the game. But other than nitpicking here and there, you couldn't have asked for this game to go any better for the Packers, with it being not only Malik Willis' first start in place of Jordan Love, and we'll see if that has to happen again, but the fact that Willis had just walked into the building less than 3 weeks ago and has been, call it, cram session, crash course, whatever you want to say, in terms of trying to learn what he can of the basics of the offense, and then digest a game plan, to get ready to take on somebody for real right away in week 2 with Jordan Love being injured. There was a lot that went into this victory, and the Packers don't get to celebrate it anymore. It's on to the Tennessee Titans right after 24 hours, but there's a lot to be proud of what they accomplished on Sunday.
Well, and you can even hear it in Matt LaFleur's voice and in his words after the game. He talked for 18 minutes or whatever it was, and just the excitement and just the effusive praise that he showered on Willis to be able to handle everything the Green Bay Packers were throwing at him, and to be able to manage that out on the field. It's one thing to be able to sit in the classroom and to learn the playbook and understand what the checks and the motions and everything are going to be. It's another thing when you're out there and all that stuff has to happen. You need to have that, that synergy between all the positions. And I can't say enough about Willis. And I thought the cool thing about it was, after he only had 25 passing yards in the first half, the second half, he was able to flash the arm a little bit. He was able to put the ball out there to allow his receivers to make plays. And that's the exciting thing. I think this young man showed in this matchup that there's still a lot of potential here. Whatever happened in Tennessee happened. Now he's a Green Bay Packer. Now he's the backup quarterback. And his disposition, it mirrors so closely to Jordan Love in that he's a leader, people rally to him, but he's not a bombastic personality. He's very straightforward. And he said it himself at his post-game press conference. It was going to be everybody pulling together to find a way to win this game. They did exactly that. I thought Adam Stenovich, Matt LaFleur, Tom Clements, the whole group being able to build this thing around him and allow him to get comfortable. If it is Malik Willis going up against his former team this upcoming weekend, he is going to be a better quarterback in that game because of everything that happened in that matchup against the Titans. And the last thing I will just quickly say here, this thing does not happen the way it happened if 2 things don't happen. The Packers stay in positive down and distance, no negative yardage plays. You are not going to be able to implement a run-heavy game plan if you're going to be pushed back. It happened once in that game. A holding penalty brought it back to 1st and 20, and Josh Jacobs broke a 34-yard gain to get it right back.
Yep.
It does not work that way in the National Football League, but it happened there. The right breaks happen. But conversely, Mike, defensively, there is so much selflessness that happened on that side of the ball. Understanding after everything that happened against Jalen Hurts, they weren't able to pin their ears back like we were talking about. They had to implement a very similar pass rush plan. The guys did that. And while you still have some stuff to clean up with the run defense and some of the explosive plays, that was a very dangerous live opponent you were facing. And Anthony Richardson can go off at any time. Just ask the Houston Texans. The Green Bay Packers defense didn't allow him to do that.
Yeah, one last quick note on Willis. He was only asked to throw the ball 14 times, 12 completions, only 2 incompletions. Never put a ball in harm's way by any stretch. All of the fakes and the handoffs and the motions and all that, he handled all of it with aplomb. And as you said, some key third down throws. The 3rd and 5, I believe it was, and he gets the one-on-one coverage outside with Romeo Doubs, puts it up there, gives 87 a chance to make the play, and Dobbs makes a fantastic catch. Another clutch 3rd down, he hits Tucker Kraft, where Kraft is, blocking his butt off all game long, and then he finally gets that opportunity to, fake the block, get out there in the route, and then boom, Willis puts it right on him, converts a big 3rd down that leads to some points there. So Willis did everything he had to do. With regard to the defense, as you said, it was they had to approach the quarterback the same way or a very similar way that they did against Philly with Anthony Richardson and his running ability. The bottom line is, yes, the Packers only have 3 sacks defensively through the first 2 games, but 2 dual threat quarterbacks in Jalen Hurts and Anthony Richardson have combined for, I believe, 70 rushing yards in those 2 games. If you're the Packers defense, you take that because those guys didn't hurt you with their legs. And quite frankly, it wasn't until that last, on the final drive, the scramble up the sideline where Richardson got, 20 yards or 21 yards, whatever it was, that he even got over 20 yards rushing in the game because the Packers stayed disciplined enough up front where they weren't worried about getting the sacks. They're running a lot of stunts, the ends and the defensive tackles. They're running a lot of stunts play after play, but it's running stunts and staying in the rushing lanes, not running stunts to go, with total abandon after the quarterback. And it takes a lot of discipline to be able to play that way, and they did that. The other guy that we have to talk about on defense, and we talked about him in training camp, and I want to make reference to something that we had talked about back then, but veteran linebacker Eric Wilson, man, 8 snaps. The guy got 8 defensive snaps in this game, and he forces a fumble over by the sideline, which unfortunately then was knocked out of bounds, and the Packers didn't really have a shot to recover it. He is in there for a 3rd and 1, a key 3rd and 1. It's actually the first play of the 4th quarter. And the Colts kind of get tricky with a little option look that they hadn't shown all game long. It wasn't Jonathan Taylor, it was Trey Sermon in the backfield. Eric Wilson plays it absolutely perfectly, plays it expertly, and helps to string out that option play, and the other teammates kind of rally there, and the Packers get a big stop, which actually becomes a tackle for loss by Xavier McKinney, and then the missed field goal. And then, lo and behold, Eric Wilson also gets an interception on a slant or an in-cut, whatever you want to call it. You can't do much more on defense in 8 snaps than what Eric Wilson did in this game on Sunday.
And that interception was one of the very few, maybe the 10 plays where Green Bay was actually playing base defense. And he gets matched up with Michael Pittman Jr. And he even said, I asked him about that in the locker room afterwards, and he said, you're up against skill, and you got to hang in there. And being able to keep the inside leverage, it was a bad mistake by Richardson.
Yeah, it's a bad decision by Richardson. He probably, I think when I looked at it on the film, I think he thought Wilson was going to peel off into the flat.
Yep.
And then that slant or the seam there with Pittman was going to be open. But Wilson stuck with Pittman, and Richardson had already decided that's where he was going with the ball, and he threw a pass that he never should have thrown.
And the part that impressed me was Eric caught that ball.
Yeah.
There is nothing about Anthony Richardson. When he throws the ball, he gets every ounce of velocity out of that football. I mean, he throws it hard, and you can see why this guy is going to be a real dangerous threat, I think, in no short time here in the National Football League, because his arm talent mixed with the fact he's a 6'3", 244-pound athlete, I get it. But the thing is that why I really like the pass rush plan, going back to that, he does not have Jalen Hurts' accuracy. He is a bit more scattershot in that. The Green Bay Packers had the right plan to approach both Hurts and Richardson. The only difference was it was more about managing risk in plays with Hurts as opposed to Richardson. That was the way you need to attack him, because you need to make sure that he can't escape the pocket to create big plays. That's where Houston really came up short when they ruptured for those 3 50-yard connections that almost won the Colts the game in the opener.
Yeah.
Bringing it all back around, though, Michael, to Wilson, he is the type of player that you need on your team to win championships, because it can't all be $10 million, $15 million linebackers and guys that are going to be out. You need role players, guys that are leaders on special teams, guys that know the system and are smart enough to put themselves in a position to make those plays, even if it is only 8 snaps. There's no warm-up, there's no tune-up. And I had asked Wilson in the locker room about that read option play, and what shows you his experience as an 8th-year player is that he said he was caught off guard by it. He was surprised by it. He wasn't expecting that when Richardson did it, but the base fundamentals and the instincts in his head didn't allow him to panic or sell out one particular way.
He looked like he was absolutely 100% prepared that was the play that was coming at him. I mean, it's somewhat stunning to actually hear him say he was kind of caught off guard. But as you said, it's about fundamentals. It's about sticking to your rules. It's about trusting what you know, because you played this game for so long and played it at this level in the NFL as long as he has. I'm reminded, and this is why I remember bringing this up when Eric Wilson was having such a good training camp this summer, and we were watching this guy going, he's going to be playing snaps on defense. This isn't just going to be a special teams guy this year. And I was reminded back then, and I am again now, the Giants game on Monday Night Football last year. Eric Wilson played 1 snap on defense. It was a 4th and short by the New York Giants, and he blew up the play. That was the only snap on defense he's in the game, and he gets the 4th down stop. On less than one hand, guys in the league who can pull that off. The Packers have one of them in their locker room, and it's pretty special to watch.
And the fact that it all happened after he forced a fumble to start everything. Like, the Packers don't recover it. The ball goes out of bounds.
Right.
But, Eric Wilson he was making plays the entire time. They played basically nickel this entire game. I think Isaiah McDuffie played 50 of the 56 snaps. Obviously, Quay Walker was out there for all of them. Both Wilson and Edgerrin Cooper just got a handful of snaps. And much like Cooper did the week earlier, Wilson made each one of them count.
Yeah. Well, if there's one thing I would say that pops up as a concern, in my opinion, the biggest concern with the Packers defense through 2 games. I know all the fans are talking about where are the sacks, blah, blah, blah. We already explained that. The issue that the Packers defense really has to take a good hard look at here moving forward is where they are against the run, because Saquon Barkley, 109 yards, but we had talked last week, one of those he busted off a 34-yarder. Yep. Other than that one play, they let Barkley out of the gate. They didn't let Barkley dominate them. I mean, yes, the Eagles fed him the ball quite a bit, but the Packers also had quite a few really good stops on Saquon Barkley. There was some back and forth. There was some give and take there with Barkley, and then he had the one big play that put him over 100 yards. Jonathan Taylor only got the ball 12 times as far as handoffs in this game. 5 of those, Wes, he ran for 16 plus out of 12 carries. So moving forward here, the Packers have to look at where they are on run defense. And Matt LaFleur, he talked about it a little bit at his Monday press conference, where he felt schematically, position-wise, on a few of those explosive runs by Taylor, the Packers were right where they needed to be. But then because somebody got over anxious and just, peeked into the wrong gap or kind of took themselves out of position rather than just be patient and hold the point and do your job, then that's how Taylor is able to sneak through there. And credit to Jonathan Taylor. He's one of the best out there. He does that to a lot of teams. But it is something I think the Packers have to look at here because through 2 games, there are definitely some questions what's going on against the run.
Yeah, and I was under no disillusion that Jonathan Taylor was going to have the same performance he had against the Texans when I think he had maybe a long carry of like 7 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't really get going at all. I figured he'd break a couple. He broke too many is what the issue was in this game. Now, thankfully, for the Packers' sake, it wasn't like there was a 60-yard touchdown run. Every single time they responded to it. Big reason why they shut them out in the first half was not allowing Taylor to continue to string those up against them. You and I were mentioning it in the press box. I mean, for him to be as successful as he was, but them only to rush it 12 times tells you 2 things. One, Green Bay did get some stops in there that made him feel not as good about running it on 2nd and long or 3rd and long. And 2, they were able to knock them out of their rhythm because you want to also get Anthony Richardson going, and they didn't allow them to do that with the passing game or even with Richardson scrambling. But the challenge is still there, and they're going to take on a Tennessee offense here that has not done a lot right so far, but they've ran the ball okay to this point, even though they're making this transition without Derrick Henry. So
yeah, they're making a go of it with Pollard.
They are
picking up Tony Pollard from the Dallas Cowboys. It's a different style of running game than Tennessee's had compared to Derrick Henry, obviously. But you know, the way things are going, and we'll talk more about it on our next show with the Titans, but the way things are going with Will Levis at quarterback, I think the Titans are going to start leaning on their running game even more.
Yeah, and the Packers are probably going to have to show a little bit more of their base in this one too. But again, that's neither here nor there at the moment. As far as this game was concerned, it's tough, Michael, because I think it just goes back to show you when you establish the run and you set up intention. I mean, the Green Bay Packers rushed for, I believe it was 164 yards in the first quarter, which was the most that they've generated in any quarter since 1985 against the St. Louis Cardinals. They came out hard, fast, and often, whereas Indianapolis, they had some really nice runs with Taylor, but they just didn't push the button on it.
They couldn't sustain it. I mean, that's to the Packers' credit.
Yeah.
I thought defensively, for the explosives the Packers gave up, I thought they responded to giving up those explosives and they stemmed the tide, which is, you know, the big plays are going to happen. I mean, it's an offense-oriented league. You can't just go out and shut anybody down. If you can, you don't want to give up the big plays, but then when you do, can you respond to them? That was the biggest positive in this one, other than the takeaways, of course. The biggest positive in this one, I thought, for the Packers defense was the way they responded to the explosive plays, because it kept that point total for the Colts down.
And what I'll bring it back to at the end of the day was, if you had to eliminate one explosive threat from this game, I still would argue that Richardson was the one you needed to do. The problem is that when you had the issues you had in the second half against Barkley and you gave up as many explosives on the ground as you did to Jonathan Taylor, you put that on film, teams are going to look to exploit it. And that's where Green Bay needs to find the response.
Well, and that's what the Colts are going to be facing too, but we're not doing Colts unscripted here, man. They've given up 470 some rushing yards in 2 games, and absolutely every team they face is going to try to run the ball down their throat until they can stop it.
It was wild. I tweeted this out, and the game moved so fast, so you go past it. But at one point in the second quarter, I believe it was with 8 minutes to go, the Packers already had as many rushing yards with 8 minutes left in the first half, 213, as the Colts had allowed in week 1. And that was the most that was allowed in week 1 in an entire game.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as far as the statistics go, there's a lot of football left to be played, but the Colts, in terms of where it's going to be tough to be ranked number 1 in run defense this year after those 2 games.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple quick thoughts on special teams before we shift gears. Daniel Whelan, the Packers punter, what a weapon he is turning into. He only had to punt the ball 3 times in this game, but those 3 punts, he averaged a 46-yard net, no return yards whatsoever for the Colts on the 3 punts. And those 3 punts pinned the Colts at their own 16, 8, and 5-yard lines. You almost can't have a better day as a punter than that. And when the Packers do have to punt, this young man, Daniel Whelan, is putting the Packers defense in a good position. He is really helping the field position situation with regard to what Jeff Hafley's crew gets to start with.
And if I remember right from my story that I wrote on our website 48 hours ago, I believe the Colts did not generate any points off of anything that came off the foot of Daniel Whelan.
They did not. Those 3 drives that started at the 16, the 8, and the 5, there were no points scored at the end of any of those 3 drives.
And there was not one more important than him pinning them back at their own 5 at the end of that game. Because the Packers did the right thing. They forced them to burn their timeouts. They were able to drain the clock down to, I believe it was 48 seconds. But Indianapolis had a chance. And with that arm, you basically just need to get to midfield and you're going to get an opportunity. He put them back at the 5. That's what allowed for a little bit of a rupture there with the 21-yard scamper by Richardson to not really hurt you that much. They still had to throw again after that to try to get a little bit closer for a Hail Mary. Be that as it may, again, bringing it back to that conversation I had with Eric Wilson, talking to him about Daniel Whelan, the kid has a long, powerful leg, and he's learned how to use it. It's not just about the gross yardage on it. It's about being able to do the Aussie-style kicks and directionally kick it when you're trying to pin them back inside the 20. The one that bounced out at the 7, that was done strictly by him. That was it bouncing inbounds and then going out of bounds without a return on it.
Yeah.
Daniel Whelan has shown a lot of finesse, too, for as much power as he has. And the Green Bay Packers have been looking for a punter for a long time, Mike. It's been throughout my entire time covering this team. They've been trying to settle on a guy. Yeah. Daniel Whelan looks like someone you can hitch the wagon to here for a decade.
And we'd be talking about an absolute textbook way to close out a game with your other 2 phases with the punt to the 5 if Quay Walker catches the interception that Richardson throws basically right at his face mask on the first play of that drive from the 5-yard line. And not only did Walker miss it, but it got deflected and the Colts caught it and then set up the scramble and ended up getting the Hail Mary shot. And Quay Walker, as Matt LaFleur said, he's kind of sick about not being able to put the game away there, because that should have been takeaway number 3 at that moment. It ended up happening on the Hail Mary. Braden Narveson, the rookie kicker, 2nd game in a row, he goes 3 for 4 on field goals. Misses one that was kind of important. It would have given the Packers a 16-point lead if he makes that, and you're up by 16 at that stage of the 4th quarter. Absolute worst case scenario, you're looking at overtime if the other team scores 2 touchdowns and gets 2 2-point conversions by the end of regulation. Worst case scenario, you're looking at overtime, and unfortunately, he wasn't able to make that one. Matt LaFleur said, hey, you can ask Brian Gutekunst about, the patience thing from the personnel side of things. From the coaching side of things, they're willing to be patient. They like what they have in Narveson. We'll see what happens. I think it's important to remind people. I'm going to remind them again in Insider Inbox later this week. Anders Carlson started his NFL career not missing a single kick for 5 straight games, and everybody thought, oh, Packers are all set. They found their kicker. This is great. Well, my point is just don't rush to judgment on Braden Narveson. Yes, he's missed 2 kicks, 45 yards and in, that he should make, that he knows he should make through the first 2 games. But, let's just see what happens here, because things didn't work out with Carlson when everything started great. So let's see how Narveson works through some of these things to hopefully get where he wants to be and where the Packers want him.
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember, the Green Bay Packers went through, Mike, I want to say it was 6 or 7 kickers throughout camp. When you talk about all those number 3 guys they brought in, and obviously Alex Hale is still with them now on the practice squad under the international exemption, they've reshuffled the deck on that position enough. Training camp ended. They placed the waiver claim on Narveson. He's the guy. He's the guy they went with, and I think barring a disaster, which is what you have to curb against, not missing one, but missing several, I feel like you got to let this young guy develop, and you do have to have that patience. I go back to what Brian Gutekunst said. I still wish he would have given himself a little bit more grace on that, because he talked about J.K. Scott, and J.K. Scott's an NFL punter, and he's fine. But Daniel Whelan, in my estimation, is a better punter than J.K. Scott. I think Corey Bojorquez is a better punter than J.K. Scott. His issue was more the holding side of things, where it was kind of disrupting stuff.
Right. I think
Packers got to where they needed to get to.
I agree that Goody needs to cut himself some slack when he criticized himself about the lack of patience with special. He gave J.K. Scott 3 seasons here.
Yeah.
It's not like, I mean, let's be real about it. There are things about the climate. There are difficulties when you're kicking in Lambeau Field, in Soldier Field, in at certain times of the year. And credit to J.K. Scott, he's gotten his career back on a better track. He's also kicking out in L.A. He doesn't have some of the same circumstances that specialists have to deal with here in Green Bay.
There was probably, and it didn't even affect, it wasn't even a part of Brian Gutekunst's tenure, I don't believe, but the only time I ever really took an issue with anything the Packers did was when they went with Rick Lovato throughout the playoffs, had him throughout training camp, and then cut him at the end of camp and brought back Brett Good after he was injured. I think if you were to take the more long-term approach at that point, because Good ended up only playing, I think, one more year after that.
Right.
It probably would have been a more salient thing to just stick with Lovato, who's been now the Eagles' long snapper for the last 7 years. That's the one I kind of would go back and say, okay, I understand that. But again, that didn't even have anything to do with Brian. So
yeah.
Be that as it may, the Packers seem to have found a kicker, because I'll say this too, and it'll be my last point on this. Anders Carlson made every kick in his first 5 games. The ball did not come off Anders Carlson's foot the way it comes off of Braden Narvis.
I totally agree with you. That's just the eye test. Right?
That's the eye test. Yeah. His 46-yarder that he made, Michael, that would have been good from 60 when you and I were watching it in the game.
Yep.
It's just about now the coaching standpoint of it, and that's where Byron Storer and Rich Bisaccia, they'll work with the guy on that. But in terms of the leg talent here, this guy's not missing a 45 or 43-yard field goal because he doesn't have the leg for it. We just got to get the trajectory figured out.
Yeah. I'm a little late here to get
us paid
business, so let's do this quickly. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. All right, real quickly, Wes, before we go, taking a look around the league after 2 weeks. Just as we all predicted, the Vikings, Steelers, Saints, Buccaneers, and Seahawks are all 2-0, and the Bengals, Jaguars, Rams, and Ravens are all 0-2. Welcome to the NFL, man. Hold on, because here we go.
Never apologize for a victory in this league. Never do it, because the Baltimore Ravens could just as easily be 2-0 right now as they're
100%. Yep.
I mean, that's the thing. You got to win the game that's in front of you. They almost beat the reigning Super Bowl champions in week 1, and then they lost to the Las Vegas Raiders the following week.
Hey, the Philadelphia Eagles had Scott Van Pelt on Monday Night Football teasing SportsCenter talking about, going into the winning Eagles locker room and the 2-0 Philadelphia Eagles. And moments later, the Philadelphia Eagles are 1-1. They've coughed one up at home in prime time in the last minute and a half. You can never rest. There is no peace whatsoever in this league. You play the game in front of you, you pack up your stuff, and you get ready to play again. That's all that this is.
And that was the other thing, too. Some of the stories that were coming out of New York after the game against Tennessee and that it wasn't a convincing enough win and things like that, it's like, dude, Aaron Rodgers just got back from the Achilles injury. He didn't play for a year.
Right.
And he got a win. It's a win.
And everybody's dumping on Kirk Cousins in Atlanta after the loss to the Steelers in week 1. Kirk Cousins is coming off of an Achilles, and he's with a new team and a whole brand new offense and everything. So, I mean, it's like, the instant judgment and the instant analysis, it's like, yes, there are things that you judge in the moment, and you analyze those things in the moment, but you don't have to draw conclusions with every single thing that happens every week. The Cincinnati Bengals just took the Super Bowl champs to the wire. And yes, I know there are some questions about officiating, this and that, whatever. But the Cincinnati Bengals just gave the champs everything they could handle. But now the Bengals are sitting there at 0-2, and they've got some stuff to figure out. So, it's just that's the way this league goes.
And it was funny, too, you and I talked last week about Detroit and Tampa Bay and just the ramifications of that matchup. It ended up being a good game, competitive game. But now you're seeing with what it looks like that the Buccaneers are going to be up against the New Orleans Saints in that division. That's why games like that really matter. And I thought, bring it back really quickly to Aaron Rodgers again in his post-game press conference, he made a really salient point, which is these are the games, these are the type of wins you need to have, because if you're going to be in the run at the end of the season, obviously you need to pick up wins throughout the course of the season, but it's sometimes the difference between 10-7 and 9-8 or 9-8 and 8-9, it comes down to one of those down to the wire type matchups in week 2. And to pick off as many of those, I mean, the Packers were the number 1 seed and got to 13 wins in 2019, basically, with that script. So the division, bringing it back quickly to the NFC North, looks like it will be competitive. I think the Minnesota Vikings are feeling themselves. I think Kevin O'Connell, you can just continually give him credit for how he's rallied that team. And as you said last week, they're going to have to continue to get innovative with what they're doing with Sam Darnold. They're going to have to try to stay ahead of that curve. But man, people believe, and that team believes. And to be able to be in a position to be 2-0, and I personally had them written and just kind of in Sharpie written down as the fourth team in this division this year.
Yep.
The Vikings are showing again they're nobody's underdog.
Hey, if you can hit a 97-yard touchdown pass against one of the best defenses in the league, that'll play.
Yeah.
And the Vikings are not going to go away anytime soon.
And here's a big secret: just give Justin Jefferson a chance, and you're probably going to have good things happening. By the way, too, last thing I'll close on this: Marvin Harrison Jr., Green Bay Packers. 4 weeks, we're going to be talking about that matchup with the Cardinals. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a handful for the National Football League this year.
Yep, absolutely. He is already proving that his draft status was no joke for sure. So with that, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team on Packers.com. For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.